We appreciate it for sure.
Yeah. Well, and I think that there's going to be some good changes coming. So, and I see. We can't talk about Cynthia. She just signed on.
Yeah, no, let's not say anything bad. It's her birthday today, just.
Oh, happy birthday, Cynthia. How are you?
She's still connecting, looks
Still
like.
connecting audio, yeah. And we have Darren Colby, brand new budget analyst at Reynolds School District, on board. Welcome, Darren. And Nicole, let's see, where are you from? I'm trying to remember.
That's what Tim said.
I reckon Nicola. Oh, I know the name. And Tim Bellinger from Oregon Trail. Tim, are you knee deep in snow up there? Not talking to me yet.
We canceled school today because of snow.
Oh, really? Well, I know that they were on a late start here in the Portland area, several districts.
Did you get snow or ice?
Snow.
Okay.
Snow.
Yeah, we got snow here.
We were up in Everett over the weekend, and there was actually quite a bit of snow on the ground up there. And quite treacherous coming down just probably south of Tacoma. Quite a big, huge flakes as you drive through Fife and into Tacoma and then south. So anyway, Tim, are you on board? Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, there you are.
Did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I met Tim Bellinger.
Oh, Tim Bellinger. Okay.
He's connecting audio. He hadn't turned it on yet. And Nicola, Tim, remind me where Nicola's from.
She's from Gladstone.
Oh, okay. Okay. So you're working with Becky then?
Yes.
Okay.
And she goes by Kwan. She's the our Thai representative.
Okay. I haven't met you yet, but it's good to meet you.
Good to meet you. สวัสดีค่ะ
Let's see, we've got Beth, Cynthia.
Tim Knight, we didn't get confirmation from CESD, did we?
Nope.
Yeah.
I never got another updater either.
Oh, really?
Really? I wouldn't lie to you.
All right. I will. I'll take care of that.
Okay.
I had to reboot my machine. I wonder if I rebooted it in the process.
Very possible. Especially when you have a bunch of VMs running. All right. Too much to do, too little time. All right, let me just do a roll call here. We've got Darren, Beth, Cynthia, Nicole. And Nicole, I cannot remember what district you are from. I don't know if you can, I hope you can hear us. Natalie and Tim. Natalie is from Lake Oswego. Tim Bellinger is from Lincoln County.
Oregon Trail.
Oregon Trail, thank you. Okay, she's switching. Oh, he's switching computers. Okay. All right. So what we're going to do, we'll give Darren a couple of minutes here. He's switching computers, but today we're basically, because this is for new users as well as experienced users, we're just going to discuss today basically just what ESP does, how it works, trying to get the general concept of what ESP does for you. before we dive into actual training. Because it doesn't really make any sense to anyone if you're not sure what the final product is supposed to be. All right, I'm not sure what Darren is coming back. So you guys should have a PowerPoint. It's a PDF actually of the PowerPoint, and we're just going to go over. I'm going to be switching back and forth between the PowerPoint. Hopefully everyone can see my screen. If not, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute and ask, because if you have it, someone else probably has it. If it's something real detailed, we might have to take it offline and we can talk about it after the training. But please feel free to interrupt and ask any questions. That's the best way. I found that that's the best way that this works with a large group of people. It is, if for the new users, it really is a lot to take in at first. It's kind of a steep learning curve. But once you get the basics and how everything, it's kind of like a puzzle, you're building your budget. Once you see how the puzzle fits together, it all makes a lot more sense. So we're just going to do a quick overview here of ESP. I might jump around on my slides a little bit, just depends on where we get started. So we're going to talk about the tabs. All right, so you can kind of see ESP in the background here, and we have different tabs: financials, employees, salary plans, grants, assumptions, and responsibility centers. You might not have grants or responsibility centers. So if you don't worry about that. We'll talk about those later. We probably won't even get to them as they're not really part of the new user training. But responsibility centers can be set up for like managers to go in, and you can specify which sections of the budget they have control over. You can really fine tune what sections they have, and they can go in, they can use ESP and go in and enter their budgets, and it rolls into the financials. So save you some work, but it's just a way of getting input from outside managers into the budget. So yeah, everything's broken into tabs, and we're going to go over each tab individually, of course. The financials tab, this is where the final values of your budget reside. Generally speaking, all the tabs are used to calculate the ending values of the financials tabs. So we're going to talk about the assumptions. This is where you set up like your payroll deductions, Social Security, unemployment. You set up your medical benefits. You set up your supplemental pay. This is where you set the factors, and we'll talk about that in a little while, because those are going to get applied to the employees. And then you have salary plans tab. We'll just take a quick look at that, where you have your salary plans and then employees. Every once in a while, my monitor shakes and it just turned off. Hang on a second. Okay, it's back. Did it go off for anybody else or just me? Hopefully it was just me, but my screen went black. Okay, well that's good, I guess, but it did go black for a few seconds. I usually use a smaller widescreen monitor, but for training, I use this bigger monitor so that it helps you guys. Is this font big enough for everyone? If not, please let me know. Okay, if not, please let me know. You can always go to view fonts and you can change the fonts if you ever need to. And we'll go over all of these options. So this is the salary plan tab, where we pull in the salary plans from the ERP system. And Darren, no, we cannot hear you. We pull in the salary plans. Employees are assigned to the salary plans, and that's how they get their rates. As far as the benefit plans as well, we'll go over all of that. So you have your assumptions. We'll look at that real quick. We talked about this is where you set up a lot of your your factors. So here's the calculations. These are calculated on the salary employees. And like here's Social Security. And we're going to go over more detail all of this. But like this is a good example where you come in here, you make one change to the Social Security factor, and then that will get applied to all of the salary accounts. So you'll set up a bunch of factors, you'll set up your medical benefits, all of your pay components. We call them pay components. Each district has a different name. Your supplemental pay, your schedules, your PER schedules, your workers' comp schedules. You set all of that type of stuff up on this assumptions tab. Then you have your salary plans tab, which we pulled in from Visions. And this is where you would go in and then make COLA changes. You would make stepping changes. And then all of that gets pushed up to affects the employees. Now this is all of the employees that we pulled in from Visions. And we'll talk about the different colors of the columns in a minute. So then you're going to spend a lot of time once you have your assumptions set up, once you know your salary plans are correct, and you have to always remember you're doing this for the following year. So this will be when we make a new year. We have not made a new year scenario yet for 23-24. I'm still in the 22-23 scenario, and we'll talk about creating a new year probably tomorrow. But you have to always remember you're thinking about what's going to happen next year, because this will all going to roll into your financial tab, where it's all broken down by, well, the way I'm looking at it right now is general fund by all of the objects. So here's the license salaries, just as an example, and here's all the license dollars, salaries that rolled up from the employees tab. So the object is to create your assumptions, make sure your salary plans are correct. Most of that gets applied to your employees, and then that gets rolled into your financials. There are some assumptions that get applied to the financials as well, not that many, but we'll go over those later. But the end effect is the value flow is building it right to left till we get to the financials. And then here, even on the financials, you have a new amount and variance. You go in here and start making changes to these values. And the starting place for this, when you create your new year, is going to be last year's, either you're adopted or you're working. So you'll notice I'm in a 22-23 scenario, and here's my 21-22 Infinite Visions working. And I also have, if I right click, I go to Infinite Visions, the adopted. But when we create a new year, we load your Infinite Visions, our Business Plus, adopted, and working, and then we copy the working into the model. The green is the model. The model is what you are working on. These are the values that you are changing. Darren, I still can't hear you, but can you hear us? I see Jane on there. Jane, what can you tell me what district?
I am with Greater Albany School District,
Oh, that's right. That's right.
and I'm new to this system, so this is all
Right.
new for me.
Right. And Brandy, I see you got on. Did you have any problems
Nope,
getting ES?
nope, I'm on, no problems.
Okay, and you got ESP up.
They are currently working on it.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Good to know. And then somebody dialed in. I'm not sure who that is, but can someone tell me who that is? The person that dialed in? Okay. Well, if you get to it, let me know who that is. And so Darren and, oh, where'd she go? Nicole, we lost, oh, Nicole. Darren and Nicole, we cannot hear you, but hopefully you guys can hear me. So we copy your working into the model, And then that's going to be your starting point. And you can always recopy, you can always reload from your ERP, and we'll get into all of that later. But as an overview, you're trying to get to this amount column right here on the financials, because when you create your budgeting documents, this is what is going to be pulled into your budgeting documents. So here's a good example. This is object 0313. You can see in the working, it was 96,825, and this is a summation, all of 0313. And I'm only looking in Fund 100. So 96,825 was copied into this fixed amount, which is the final amount. And we'll talk about how these columns build left to right. But this right amount column is the column that when you create your budgeting documents, this will be the values that are where the values come from when you create your document. So everything is to get to these values in this column. Most of it's going to be on your employees, which we'll spend a lot of time working on. So any questions about that? It's all, again, all used to build to get to the financials tab. So really understanding the flow and where the values are going and how they roll up is important. You can, this 39 million is coming from the employees, but you also always have the ability to override that value. We don't really recommend it. It's best to let, if you have employee changes, make them on the employees tab. But when crunch time comes, you might need to if you need this final amount value to change, you might find yourself having to go in here and force a number in. Hopefully you don't have to. I don't think it happens often, but that ability is there. But remember that we're always starting with your working scenario as far as the financials go. And then the employees, when you build your New Year scenario, we do a snapshot of the employees that currently exist in your ERP. We copy them into the model. So as of July 27th at 6:28, if you could look down here, this is when the last time these employees were reloaded. As of that time, this is a snapshot of where all the employees were. And it gets very kind of tricky because, you got to find out where all of these employees are going to be next year, if there's going to be new hires, if there's going to be vacancies, retirements. That's what I mean, that a lot of your time will be spent on the employees and making sure they're correct. As well, things are always changing. People are quitting, getting fired, rehired in your ERP, and you have to decide, do you want to keep your model updated? And we'll talk more about that, how to reload from ERP. But at some point, you've got to quit reloading because you have to lock down the numbers, because anytime you reload and you change your model, it's going to all roll up into the financials, and your values on the financials will change. So you got to be careful about any changes you make, because they will affect your financials. And once you get down to time to print, you want to be very careful about changes. And you can lock your scenario, and we'll talk about that later. Any questions so far about the tabs? We're going to go over all the details later about what each tab does specifically and how to make changes. But just understanding that it's all about the financials and that amount column on the financials tab. All right. Yeah. Okay. Let's talk about an important piece, and that is the scope. Right now, let me collapse this up. If you have a plus and minus here, you can use that to expand and collapse the tree, We call this the main tree here, the column on the left. And it doesn't matter if you're on the financials or the employees. You can collapse that down. The scope is probably one of the best features of ESP because it allows you to control what you're seeing in the grid and how you're seeing it. If you look right here, this is called the scope toolbar. I have Fund 100, and then all of this should look familiar to everybody. Object, area, center, function, sub area. Yours, I know, especially in Richland, y'all's looks different, and each district's can look different. It just depends on what you have these named as or what your elements are. But right now, I am looking at only Fund 100, and then by object, and then area, center, function, and sub, they're green, which means they are summed up to the object. So if you look over here in the grid, it'll all make sense. Here's Fund 100, and notice when I click on it, the element that I click on will turn blue, so that you know that is what you have selected. When I click on an object, that turns blue. So if you ever, because it might get detailed and you might forget what is what, if you click on it, it will tell you what that element is up here. So I'm looking at Fund by object, and only Fund 100 by object. So here's Fund 100, and then here's all of the employees. Remember, I'm on the Employees tab. So these are only employees, or fundings really, not just specifically employees, that are in these, each one of these objects. So I'm going to expand out just 0111. So here's Fund 100, object 0111, and here's all of my 0111 employees. If I want to look, let's say I only want to look only at the licensed salaries, and I don't want all of these other ones there right now. You click this button right here. This is called the scope selection form. It opens up the scope, and basically it mirrors what you have up here in the toolbar. So here's Fund 100, but for object, if you leave it blank, that means everything. Show me everything. But I only want to look at 0111. Oh, one too many. And it validates as you type what you're looking at. Actually, let's say I want to look at 0111 through 0113, because you notice you have a left and a right column here. I can put 0113. And then these are the summing buttons. This is saying, you know, we know those elements are there, but we don't want to break out by these elements. So just sum up to just show me the breakout of the objects and the fund. And if you have ESP open, go ahead and play with it. Once you learn how it works, it makes a lot more sense once you play with it and see what it does. So when I click OK, I expect to see Fund 100. Actually, you know what? Let's get rid of just Fund 100. So now we're going to say any fund, any license through administrative in any fund, but it's still going to be broken out by fund, then by object. So notice what I have here, and then notice what the grid does after I click OK. So notice my toolbar, the Fund 100 went away. Now it's just fund, and then the objects are still there. It does take a few seconds. Depending on how many records it has to load, depends on how fast it will build the grid. All right, so let me collapse this up. So now notice I have all of these funds, because before I just had 100. I was just filtered down to 100. Now I opened it up to all funds. So here's all of the funds available that have fundings in them. And then within each fund, here are those three objects that I specified. And only those three objects. So if there's anybody else in other objects, like there could be a lot of supplemental objects that has fundings, they would not show up in here. So you can see in Fund 206, all I have is a licensed salary with these employees. Let me reset my column layout here. And my screen went black again. I'll work on this tonight after we get done, figure out why it's going black. Lucky it's only black for a couple of
Yeah,
seconds.
it's not going black on this side.
Good. So here we're looking at Fund 206, licensed salaries. And if you look in this salary FTE, there's 5.95 total FTE in this fund. And then these are the employees. There's vacant positions there. But all of these came from Infinite Visions this way, or the daily. We'll get into, that's a very detailed subject we'll talk about probably tomorrow. So any questions about the scope? Now let's go to the financials. Now, one of these buttons that you need to pay attention to is this is called lock the grid. I'm sorry, lock the scope between the grids. So because I've switched to the financials because the financials has a scope as well. If you want to keep the same scope that you have currently, you can lock it and it will carry this scope to the financials tab. I don't want to carry this over to the financials, so I'm going to unlock it, gray it out, and whatever scope I had there before will still be there. So this was there before and it stayed there. Had I locked it, this would have changed to the same scope that I just brought over from the employees tab. So remember that that's a good tool to use when you want to keep the same scope between your employees and your financials tab. So now that you understand the scope a little bit more, it works the same way on the financials tab. Here's Fund Just 100, and then here's all of the objects that exist. Well, I shouldn't say exist. I should say all of the objects that have dollars in them. And when I say in them, I don't mean just in the model. Here's a good example, like 0520. It didn't have anything, nothing was budgeted in the working or the adopted. So that's why there's nothing in the model, the green model. But the reason why it exists on this grid right now is because in 2021, there were some actuals. Everyone should have 3 columns to the right with the 3 prior year actuals in them. So if there's any dollars in either the working, your model, or one of the 3 prior years, it will show up in the grid. And the blue and the purple are just for reference, right? This is just your history, 3 years of history. And then this is what you currently budgeted. And these are not editable, they're just editable. They're just there to remind you or show you what the history is of that, whatever you're looking at. And then whether or not, you know, it might help you make decisions about changes you want to make to the model, the green, because the green is what you're working on. These other ones are reference only. Does everyone understand why 520? It's empty all across the amount, the adopted, the working, but because there were a few dollars 2 years ago, it's going to show up. We load it and show it in the grid. All right. So back to the scope. So I'm still looking at just Fund 100 by object. So let's say, let me find a fairly smaller one. So let's say I want to look at printing and binding, because right now we are looking at it just at the object level. We don't care about sub, function, center, or area. But let's say we want to drill into, find out exactly which full budget items make up printing and binding. What makes up this 20,550? So you can go to your scope. And I'm just going to put in object 0355. And I'm going to move it to the bottom. And then over here in this summing, I don't want the summing anymore because I want a full scope for 0355. I want to see the full account code. So let me click OK. So now notice I have the full shebang here. I've got Fund 100. Area is 045. Actually, hang on, let me do something because this is not the right order that you would, this is the order here, right? This is the actual account number, fund, function, object, area, sub area. So I want to make it function so that it looks, there we go, area, sub area. Oh yeah, so FYI, you can click and drag these around too. I should mention that. Click OK. Okay, so this makes a little bit more sense. So here's Fund 100, and that's because we're looking, Fund 100's in the scope. Here's the function. Remember, if you're not sure what one of these is, you can click on it and it will highlight up here. So that's a function. Printing is the object, the center, and then the area. And then here is the account code. Now, Richland, you guys have your Business Plus account code because this is an ESP account code. And I think for most of you guys who have visions, it's going to look very similar, or it should look exactly the same. But Richland, you guys have a different account code structure up there that you can add. You can actually add your own account code. It's called the ERP account code. So this is the full account code, and in that full account code, there's $1,500. So these are all of the individual accounts that made up this $20,550 that we saw when we had summed everything up to the object. So this code, this account code existed in the working. When the New Year scenario was created, this account code and 1500 was copied into the model. And then that's how it became an account code in the model. All of these, as I said earlier, they just get copied into the model because this is going to be your starting point for 23-24. So if you ever need to look at it in detail, just make sure you take out any of the summing. But let's say I want to say, I want to look at it by function. I don't care about center or object. I just want to know how many dollars are in each function. So I'm going to clear this object. And if you have two erasers up here, this eraser clears everything, each field. This eraser clears just the one that you have selected. So I'm going to clear out that object code. I've already got my function here, which is good. So I'm just going to sum under the function. So the object, center, area, and sub area are all going to be summed up to the function. So just notice what I have here and notice what the grid does after I click OK. Understanding how the scope works is like super important to using ESP. So sorry if I spend too much time on it, but it really controls how you look at ESP. So now over here, here's general fund by each function. And notice I can't break it out anymore because all of the other elements are summed up to the function. So I'm only looking at the function. So in Fund 100, 1111, I have 23,131,147 and 209 FTE. So you can see how quickly you can figure out what you want to look at, how you want to look at it, how you want to sum it up by using the scope. You also have, what I see a lot of people use is I'll move the center. Now let's look at it by center and then by object. I don't care about function area or sub area anymore. So I'm going to sum. You always sum under what you want to roll up to. Click OK. And I do get asked a lot. People call me, new users, and I say, Tim, I don't see this. And the first thing I look at is their scope. A lot of times they're looking for something that's not, that they forgot to add to their scope, or they're somehow excluding. Like if you were looking for other funds right now, you wouldn't see it. You would only see Fund 100. So now here's general fund, and here's every center within the general fund and the dollars associated with it. If I expand it out, here's all of the objects that belong to Buckner Academy, along with the FTE. And we'll go over what all of these symbols mean in a little while. You can also add, on the scope, you can add fund balance and revenue. By default, you have just expenses. But if you want to get rid of, let's see, we'll get rid of expenses and just look at fund balance and revenue. You can see if it got a lot smaller because there are no fund balance and revenues, like Buckner Academy is gone. There is no fund balance or revenue accounts in Buckner. So here's Shastina, and it has revenue. Oh, again, it's empty here, so there must be dollars in, yeah. And anytime you see revenue or fund balance, it's going to be as a negative. So that's some weird stuff going on in 2021, apparently. Probably COVID, I'm guessing. That made a lot of weird things happen. But most of it is going to live in this Center 091 revenue account. So I'm only looking at, and if you notice up here, back up here, when you have fund balance and or revenue, it will show here to remind you that you're not, you're not looking at expenses right now. This is just fund balance and revenue. So really understanding the scope, moving these around, understanding how that works, and all you're doing is just saying, how do I want to look at the values in the grid? So moving them around, and the summing is probably the two most important parts. You can always either select a value in here, like I could say I want Buckner, and sometimes you have to tab out of it, Buckner to St. Helens. So now I'll be looking at just center 01 through 06. Another way to do it is if you like to type, you could type in, oh crap, I already forgot the number. Buckner 001, you could type in 001-006. That's the same thing as doing one in this column and one in this column. It's a range. If you wanted just 1 and 6, you could do 001, 006. And let's see what that does. So now I'm only looking at, well, I'm all funds now, but just Buckner and St. Helens. This really doesn't mean anything. So you can use a range, you can use a comma. Scott, can you think of anything else that we do in the scope besides commas and ranges?
Just remember, you can do both. You can actually do 001-006, comma
010, yeah. So yeah, you can really build it up specifically. So now we're looking at center 1 and center 6 through 10. So I do get it a lot. So it is going to happen where, you know, I get an email and a screenshot and people not sure why they're not seeing something in the grid. And I always, usually it's the first thing is, please check the scope. One thing we should cover before we get too far, and I don't want anybody to make any changes. I thought I had it. My bad, guys. I'm sorry. I thought I had it ready to go. Just a second. Let me open it. Okay, so let's talk about this real quick, getting away from training just for a second. And this is just a kind of a housekeeping thing. You have two databases. Every district has two databases. One ends in a PRD and one ends in a TST. And the database, that's where all of your data lives. Obviously, the PRD one is the one you're going to be in 99% of the time, and that's your real data that you're working on. The test database is what we're going to be using this week to play around and test and do things in, so that you don't mess around with your production. The only drawback to this is and then when we finish Friday, you're going to want to go back to your PRD database. So the only thing you have to write down or remember, or you can choose to stay in your PRD if you wish, because we can make scenarios that you can just play around in if you want. As if you make any, firm changes that you want in your test database, they will not be in your production database. They are completely separate. And everyone should have, if you go to File, go to Database, I have everyone's database, but you should only see two databases. Like for Classkity here, there's a PRD and a TST. We suggest being in your TST for playing around, training, or you can stay in your production and you can create a scenario just for like a sandbox, just to play around, as long as you know that that's what it's being used for. Because if you make any changes, if you're on your test database and you go to your assumptions and we talk about how to change your benefit plans and you put in real numbers, those numbers will be lost when you go back to your production database. So it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're in test, which means you can play around and do what you want. But any changes that you make, you'll lose them on your production and you'll have to re-enter them on your production database at the end of the week. Any questions about that? Let me know if you want to know how to switch. Tomorrow we'll talk about creating scenarios that you can build in production, and we can label it like sandbox. And then that way everyone will know that, everyone at your district will see, okay, that's a sandbox. That was just for testing. That might be the better way to go than to switch to your test database. But we'll talk about that probably tomorrow morning. But for now, you guys really don't have to do anything. We're just listening and going over ESP right now. Any questions about the test and production? You do want to, once this training is over, regardless, you want to make sure that you are in your PRD database. And a way to make sure is, well, first of all, you can do the file, database, and whatever database you have selected, you should have a check mark next to it. Or if you look in the bottom, this status bar down here, you can see that I'm currently in ESP, CSD, TST. Most of y'all's right now should be, whatever your district name is, PRD. And we'll talk about these other values in a little bit. So, we just want to be careful and not change anything that is actual production values. Most of you've finished for the year last year and you're moving forward to the next year anyway. So hopefully you're not in like your adopted scenarios and making changes in there. But please feel free to ping me after this and we'll double check and make sure that you're good to go. We'll talk about data sets next. So data sets, I'm sure you guys have all noticed. Let me go back to the financials. Any questions about the scope? It's probably the most important thing initially to understand on how to use ESP. Because if you don't understand how these values are laid out, then it's kind of pointless beyond that. So please play around with the scope. You can't break anything. Move things around, type values in, use the summing, just get used to how it works. Also, for some of the bigger districts, the more limited you have your scope, the faster the grids will load because you'll obviously be loading less records. So if you're working just in one function, maybe it's best just to put that one function in because you're going to load a lot less records. One thing you can, even though the function is in my summary, you can still put values in to limit it. Let me click OK. So even though I'm not broken, oh, well, there's nobody in there, but even though I'm broken out by just fund by center, it is also limited to just function 1110. There's obviously nobody in here. I do get this a lot too. People say, Tim, there's nothing there. And a lot of times it's because this was typed wrong or there's just nobody, there's no records there's no center, fund 100, anything with the center, function 1110. It doesn't exist. If it doesn't exist, you'll get this, no budget items found. If I was on the employees, it would say no, I think it says no employee records found. So if you ever get this, almost 100%, it's probably because of your scope. So I'm going to just put in a range here. Maybe I can find somebody. Some records, I mean. Okay, so here's Fund 100 by these three centers. This doesn't tell us a whole lot, but this is telling me, see, it doesn't even tell me which function it is because I'm in I'm summed into my function. So if I want to see which functions exist in those centers, I would take the function out of the summing. So then it will be fund by center by function. All right, so only 1111 within that range exists for these three centers. Okay, I probably spent enough time on the scope. Let me know if you have any more questions. Let me put the scope back. We call this the modeling scope, where you put the object under the fund. I'm going to clear everything. I'm going to sum up to the object. Click OK. So this is a very, if you don't have anything checked, it will assume only expenditures. I'm going to go and click anyway. But if nothing's checked, it's only expenses. So this is a good, I'm going to figure out what that is. It's like a orphaned account code with some dollars in it. This is a good overview when you have it by fund by object. And let me collapse this up. So here's every fund that exists. And then within each fund, just the objects, rolled up just to the objects. So I'm going to limit it just to fund 100 because I don't care about the other funds right now. And then we're going to talk about these colors. So we talked about the green. Well, forget that. Let's start with the blue because this is generally where your scenario starts. When you create a new year scenario, as I said before, it loads the working in from, in this case, Infinite Visions or Business Plus. It loads the working and the adopted into ESP. It then copies it into the model. And again, remember, these are individual account codes that gets copied over. I showed that a while ago when you had the full account code. That's how these numbers are being built up. So this is only loaded into ESP on the day that you build your New Year scenario. It goes out, looks in Infinite Visions or Business Plus, grabs the adopted, grabs the working, pulls it into the ESP columns, and then copies it into the model. And then this, therefore, after that, unless you manually reload, these values will not change. Obviously, your model values will, because you're going to start making changes to those. But your working and your adopted, especially your adopted, will not change. Your working could change, right? That does happen. In this particular instance, the adopted and the working are the same, at least for Fund 100. If you made a change to your working, you could then go out and reload. But just remember that on the day this scenario was built, the working was loaded and copied into the green amount columns. On a daily basis, you have your actuals. And the only ones that are changing really are your current year actuals. For this one, it would be the 22-23 actuals.
Hey, Tim, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can.
I apologize, you guys. I had reserved a space, right? And they hired a new employee that had to take a test. So my space got trumped. And so as I was trying to figure out what was going on, I decided, well, I'll just go back to my space, right? My cubicle,
Yeah.
and log in. But because it was so loud, my cube mates were like, can you please just go? So the person vacates the office because it's all configured differently. I've just been playing around, trying to call you guys, send you guys messages. And anyway, I'm here. So I've been around. I just apologize for being tardy.
Oh, no problem. No problem. If you and I can connect a little bit offline after this, and I can go over some of the things I've talked about so far.
Okay.
And hey, Darren.
Yeah.
Scott Cropley here. You know, you can always email support@espaccess.net, or if you have ESP open, Tim, point to the life preserver ring. That on the toolbar, you can just click remote support, and we'll also get an email, and we'll pop up and we can chat with you or actually connect to your desktop.
Okay. Well, that's one of my problems, Scott, is just that I was unable to connect. So I tried it earlier today to make sure, I think you guys sent out an email making sure that you could connect. And then I thought I could connect, but then when I did it for real, it didn't work.
Okay, are you in?
Down,
can you see ESP now?
let me try to log into it again. I'm trying to.
Hey, Darren, go ahead and I'll chat with you on Teams and we'll get it figured out.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
So the purple, these are the actuals, and I sent everyone a PDF. It should be in there, just kind of discussing a little bit more in detail about, you have the model green, current, we call it current. You can call it your Infinite Visions data or Business Plus data, and then the purple actuals. And we'll go over what the baseline is probably Wednesday or Thursday. But these are what we call individualized data sets. They exist after you make a copy, of course, from one to the other. They exist independently of each other. So if you make a change in here to object 247, it's obviously not going to affect your adopted working or your actual values. Again, these are here just as reference only. The actuals, purples, they update nightly, every night. So if a change gets if something gets processed for 247, these values should be increasing throughout the year every day, because these are dollars being spent as the year progresses. And again, they're here for reference only. And then these are already closed out, probably 2021, 21, 22 are closed out. And that's, again, for reference, really, what was spent prior. And then the current year actuals are what's happening as the year progresses. And then the blue was only loaded when you built the new year scenario, and these values don't change until you reload again. So that's another huge part of ESP, especially when we get to the employees, because you have the same colors over there. When you reload the employees, they're just in the blue, and then that doesn't change, but yet we know every day changes are happening in your ERP system. And there's purple columns on the employees that will reflect daily what's happening to the employees. So the employees get a little more tricky with these different data sets, but just know that they are independent of each other. The purple, well, really only the current year, it updates daily. And if you look down here, so a while ago we looked at my database name. To the right of it is a little database with a down symbol, which means the last time that the financials were reloaded. Y'all should say, well, I don't know what your infinite visions, and that's talking about the blue column, what your date there is, but the next date is the date of the daily. So if you put your mouse cursor over and let it sit, you should have what we call a tooltip pop up. And if you move it, you'll lose it. As you can see right here, you guys should have a daily number. It should be today's date for the daily. If not, let us know. But every day that the values reload, it updates this date. So these numbers did come from, actually it was last night, technically. Sometime about 3 or 4 in the morning, these actuals reloaded. So these are changing, the purple are changing every day. The blue is only when you tell it to. Only if you manually, if you made a change to your working, and for some reason you want to see that change in ESP, you go to tools, reload working, and we'll do that later. But you can manually reload your working into here. And then if you want to, you can copy those changes into the model. But remember, what we always try to emphasize is the model, at some point, you got to quit making changes or quit bringing in changes from Infinite Visions or ERP, because, you've got to a certain point where, you want to be real careful about what changes you're bringing in. But at first, you just want to bring in everything, copy it into the model. You're taking a snapshot of where we are in the financials and where you are in the employees, and then that's going to be your starting point. Any questions about these data sets? Any questions about anything? Sometimes. So just remember, the green is what you're working on. The blue and the purple, they are reference only, to basically show either what you budgeted or what you're historically spending or spent. All right. Let's look at these same colors, but on the employees tab, where it gets a little bit more complicated. And it's only more complicated because there's so much churn, employee churn, every day, every month, every week. So let me show you guys how I like to look at my employees. What I do is I like to just do it by object. I'm gonna put, because I don't care what fund they're in, I just want them broken out by object. So I move the object to the top, And notice these are grayed out, right? Because there is no fund balance or revenue associated with employees. So I move the object to the top and I sum just under the object. So try to imagine what the grid's going to look like when I press OK. It should be just my objects and then that's it with a list of employees, not broken out by any other element because I'm summed up to the object. You might like to do it by center or by function. You know, there's a million ways to lay the values out. And I didn't put in any qualifiers, so I'm looking at all the employees. All right, let me collapse this up. I think this is what it looked like when we first started. So basically, here's just each one of these objects has fundings in them. Most of it's going to be in this licensed, classified, or admin. So if I expand licensed, here's all of my licensed. If you're ever curious about how many rows there are, now, you know, it's not just employees, right? Because here's Edgar Alexander. He has 2 fundings. He's split funded, but it's 2 different records. Because if you look down here, again, on the status line, this 2,159, that's how many records there are. But that's not how many employees there are, because like we know Edgar is split. And there's also supplemental funding involved. But if you're curious about just how many records or rows there are, it's right down here, 2159. And this number to the left of it with the colon in between, that just tells you what row you're on. So here, and notice there's a lot more columns on the employees tab. And then there's a lot more you can add as well. And we'll go over those as we get to them. This button right here, if your columns, because you can move your columns around, you can hide them, you can add new ones. If you ever want to get back to your default column layout, this toolbar button right here with the little red circle, it will reset the column layout. And all of these toolbar buttons, I know there's a lot, but if you let your mouse sit for a second, it will tell you what each one is. Sometimes I forget to, and I have to refresh my memory. But this one will always reset your columns back to the ESP default layout, which might or might not be helpful. That's just something we did. And maybe they help you, maybe they don't. You can, we'll talk about it later. You can set your columns and then save a layout if you like a certain column layout. And we'll talk about that later this week. But right now, I just want to talk about the different colors. I'm going to have to add the purple columns because by default, you see, right, because I did the reset layout, the purple columns are not here. All I have are my blue and my green. The blue, it's the same as what we talked about on the financials. When you built this scenario or this New Year scenario, it went out to Infinite Visions and it loaded all of these employees or fundings into the blue columns. And then it copied them into the green column. And that is your starting point. And that was done on 7/27/22 at 6:28 in the morning. So these blue columns are as of 4 months ago. So I'm going to add the actual columns. And the way to add columns is you right click on a column heading. And notice here is a data set submenus. And then these are those 3 submenus. Hang on, sorry, my screen went black again. Come back. Seems to be saying black or longer each time. That's not good. Okay, it's back. I'll fix that before tomorrow. Here are the data sets that we've been talking about, the model. And then within the model, you have a lot of columns that you can add, we'll talk about. Here's the blue Infinite Visions or Business Plus data sets. So any columns that I were to add from this data set would be blue because I'm in the Infinite Visions data set, what we call the current data set, the blue columns. And then here is the purple data set. And there's this add common. This is like kind of like a default. It will add the most used columns that we indicate as or see as most used or most useful. So if you click add, so I'm in the Infinite Visions data set, Infinite Visions daily data set. I'm going to click add common. So notice I've got purple columns now. And again, if you guys put your mouse cursor over this date and time, it should say Infinite Visions daily and today's date. I don't think mine will because mine's a test database. It does not get updated. No. But you guys, it should say for Infinite Visions daily and today's date. That means these employees' actuals were loaded at whatever time it says, 4 o'clock this morning. So now this is a snapshot of what's in Visions as of, let's just pretend mine says this morning, okay? As of this morning, this is what's in Infinite Visions. It might have already changed, but you won't see that change until tomorrow on the reload. But here's a good example. Edgar Alexander, we were talking about him. So on July 27th, when this scenario was created, or when these were loaded into Infinite Visions, he was an employee. There's his account code. Oh, sorry. Here's his one more. Here's his account code. He had work time, work hours, salary plan. But apparently something's happened because on the actuals, he's not there. So this is what I was talking about where things get a little more complicated on the employees because you're going to have so much turnover, new hires and people that leave. They're still going to exist in your model, or they're going to exist in your blue Infinite Visions or your blue ERP current data.
You hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, not you.
So you're still going to have some employees that exist in your older data, and therefore they probably exist in your model because when this was reloaded into your into ESP, it was copied into your model. But on the daily, at some point they were either moved. It's possible they could be moved. We don't know yet. But they're definitely not in these two account codes anymore. That's for sure. Everyone should be able to right click on the employee's name and go to either Business Plus or Infinite Vision Details. This is a live look back into your ERP system. Scott, does it work for mine? Let's see.
Should.
Should, okay, good. I haven't done it in a little while. Okay, cool. So this is a live look back into Infinite Visions. And you, to the, I'm sorry, Scott, what's it called? The pay and records table?
Well, it's a compilation of several. It has to access quite a few of the same tables we use for the employee load, but it's basically in Infinite Visions, it's positions and pay.
Positions and pay, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, you don't have to switch screens and go to your ERP to get a quick look. But I don't see any, all I see for him is like no real pay, just supplemental.
Yeah, that's all it looks like.
Right.
So
So a
scroll,
lot.
scroll all the way to the right. Yeah, go back to the back. And where was he? Was this just a regular position?
Yeah.
Just show me the grid.
Yeah, he was 0111. No, sorry. Yeah, 0111. He was 0111.
And he has daily? Well, we haven't updated.
No, he
the
doesn't
data.
have daily anymore. No.
Right, but we haven't updated the data. We'll reload the. He doesn't have daily.
Right.
Probably something's changed with that.
Right.
And
But anyway, you can right click, do Infinite Visions details, Business Plus details, and try to figure out what's going on. And at first, part of your New Year scenario, part of what you're going to have to do is spend a lot of time figuring out what is going on with your employees, certain employees. Like, is this guy supposed to be there? He's got all these other supplementals. Figure out exactly what's going on with, you might have to email HR and say, what's going on with Edgar Alexander? Another thing you'll see quite often are people that get moved. Let me see if I can find somebody. I thought I had somebody. They'll get moved position. This one might be one right here. Yep. They'll get moved and that the old account will not get closed out. This one might not be one, but you can see she came in with 2.0 FTE, right? So this column is called salary FTE, and for this one funding, it is 1.0, but she has another funding that's 1.0. So her total, which is this column, her total salary FTE is 2. So we do an audit and we put a little exclamation mark because we know most of the time you're not going to have anybody over 1.0, and we point these out. A lot of times what you're going to see on a New Year scenario are employees that get moved to a new position and they'll come in, the old position won't get closed, so both positions will come into ESP. They'll both be live in your ERP, and ESP doesn't know which one is right or closed because it wasn't told to. So it'll bring in both positions and then just tell you. You can always do the right click, show details. Yeah, so she only has one position now. So this is really an invaluable tool. The right click, show IV or show Business Plus details to try to understand. And you also have all of their other supplemental data here. And you can sometimes try to figure out which some of the benefits that they've chosen that they're on. You can find out a lot of information. So this just saves you from having to switch tabs or go over to your Citrix or your other interface. You could just do a quick lookup. So just to reiterate, currently my green is a snapshot of what happened on July 27th, because that's when the blue was reloaded and it was copied into the model. But then daily changes are happening. And then at 4 o'clock in the morning, these values come in. So here's another example. Here's Jacob. He had values on July 27th for this funding, this account code, but they don't exist anymore. As of this morning, they don't exist. So part of your decision-making process is, because every day, if a new employee comes in, let me see if I can find a new employee. If a new employee gets hired they obviously will not be in your model, right? Because when you reload, when this model was built, it came from the Infinite Visions. But ESP will bring them in. Let's see if I can just find an example of one. So let's see, maybe Erica here. Okay, yep, here we go, perfect. So Erica, notice she has no model values because she has no blue value. So on July 27th, she was not an employee. But at some point, she did become an employee because she now appears in the actuals. So you can see that on a daily basis, you know, things are changing quite often. And that means your employees tab is changing. But also notice that when a new employee comes in, we don't just automatically copy them into your model. Nothing ever gets automatically copied into your model, because we don't want to change, you know, values that you've been working on. So is this making sense to everyone? It's really important because you're going to open up your employees tab and you're going to see these grayed out lines. They come in grayed out with a line through them, but they're going to have empty values here and empty values here. Grayed out with a line means they're inactive. It means that there's data that exists in the grid, but they're not active in the model. So it's kind of a juggling act, because now you have to ask yourself, well, is Erica replacing somebody? Was she a new hire, a new position? Do I need to budget for her next year? So I think that's probably a big part of what you guys have to do when you're creating your new year. And then at some point, you have to start ignoring the daily, because you know you're going to try to lock things down and quit making changes. And we'll go over how to create budgeted positions, how to, if you do want to bring her in, it's easy. You just right click and say copy from Infinite Visions daily, and it brings her into the model. But we'll do that later this week. But understanding the relationship between these different data sets, especially on the employees tab, is of great importance. Questions? I feel like I'm talking to myself.
We hear you.
All right, that's good. That's good. I guess no questions means I'm explaining it perfectly.
That is it for sure.
Yeah, that's it. Most of y'all have been here for a while, so this is all old news. All right. So if in the PDFs I sent you, there's a little bit more information about the data sets. Let me just go through here. Again, the blue and the purple are not editable. Unless you're an admin, you can change the amount column on the financials. And the whole purpose is because maybe you're printing your documents and you realize your working is wrong and you want to change this number, you can, but only administrators can change this number. Because when you print your budget documents, it's going to have this green model amount column. It's going to have your adopted, or you're working, probably you're working, and it's going to have your actuals in there as well. But the only thing editable is the working if you're, Scott, what happened to, I thought, don't we have the encumbrance as a default column? I thought we did.
Uh-oh, now Scott's not even talking
Yeah,
to
now
you.
nobody's talking to me. Just a second. Oh, I didn't mean to add that. All right, I'll check with that later. But I thought we had this broken out more, where it has the amount plus any encumbrances to get to the total amount. But let me double check that. But it's still basically the same. These are just going to be your actuals in your prior years. And these same values, when you create your budget book documents, they all come from the same place. I get that asked a lot, where they say the values look weird on the budget book documents. And the first thing I do is we just come look at it in the scope on here to try to figure out where the values are coming from, because they come from the same place, your budget book documents, your spreadsheets. Speaking of spreadsheets, real quick, something you guys might need that comes in handy. If you have a grid that you want to export to a spreadsheet, we have a Save to Spreadsheet toolbar icon. So if you just need a quick and dirty report to give to somebody, you can just click this button right here. And again, the less data you have, the quicker the spreadsheet will generate. But it will basically just dump out a spreadsheet in Excel with what you have in the grid. So then you can do whatever you want with it. You can email it, whatever you want to do. So that comes in handy. And that toolbar icon is available pretty much on every tab. Normally it's either you care about the financials or the employees, but that's just a quick way to create a spreadsheet. It's under reports as well. The one that I created was called formatted. And formatted means it has all the colors and the tree. It basically looks just like the grid, but then you have unformatted and then raw data, which will unpivot all of these. You can play.
The only thing with the formatted one, if you make a change to the Excel, it doesn't recalculate anything.
Oh,
Just
right,
FYI
right.
for
right.
new people.
Good to know. So you're saying, like, if I change this value, it won't update this value?
I
Right.
believe that's correct.
No, you're right,
yes.
because if you click on it,
The
you can see
formulas are not
there's
there.
no formula, right?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So be aware of that. That's good to know. Yep. But yeah, so all the values when you do create, because we have a whole separate budget book that you can build an entire budget document from. It pulls the values from the same place that you see here in the grid. So that's why, you know, these amount columns that's your ultimate goal, is getting these values on the amount column to where you want. I guess we should probably talk about continuing data sets, because you can tell ESP when to reload, and it's kind of a two-step process. You can reload, and when we say reload, it only applies to the blue ERP columns, because the actuals, they reload every day on their own. You can actually go and reload them whenever you want to, but generally when you reload, you're reloading your blue Infinite Visions or Business Plus columns. And normally you're not going to do it on the financials very much. It's going to be, let's say you've decided that, you know, I want to get a brand new snapshot of what's in Visions and copy it into the model. So you want to update your blue Infinite Visions. You can go to Tools, and you guys don't do this right now. You don't have to do it. Just watch me for a second. Employees, reload employees. And you're not supposed to get an error. I haven't played with this database in a while. But you can reload your employees whenever you want to, and that will refresh these blue columns. And then you're also given the option of copying, go ahead and say copy that into the model. But you have to be, and there's a few different places where you can say copy to model, but just be aware that if you have made any changes, it will overwrite any changes. But there's not many places where that happens. And if it does happen, we give you a pop-up warning that you're about to overwrite your model. If you, and we'll get into more detail about this in a little while, a lot of your supplemental pay on the assumptions, when you set up your supplemental pay, a lot of that is actuals dollars that you're pulling in. And a lot of times you want to just reload those actual dollars. We have, as an example, like you click on the supplemental pay on the left and you have the properties on the right. Here's a good example of update the model factors on the next employee reload. So you would click that box and it would say it's going to reload the employees, but only copy the supplemental into the model in this particular case. But I just wanted to show you guys an example of where sometimes you can reload and you can copy just portions of an employee's dollars into the model, because you might want to do this when you create supplemental pay. And we'll do an example of that probably Thursday. But it is possible to reload and copy just individuals into into the model. This Erica Grossman, we talked about her. She did not exist on July 27th, but between then and now she does exist. And if you wanted to see when she was hired, you should be able to right click, Infinite Vision Details, and there should be a hire date sometime after July 27th. Position start 8/29 on my birthday. She was hired on my birthday. Oh, I'm sorry, she was hired 9/14. The position, this is the position start date, but her actual hire date was 9/14. So that's why she did not exist in the blue Infinite Visions columns, because on July 27th, she was not an employee. If I were to go and reload the employees right now, she would show up in the blue. So that means on the morning of 9/14, if you turned on your computer and opened ESP, you would all of a sudden see her in ESP, just like this, empty, except for the actuals. So that just goes to show that, you know, it's gonna, and you can see there's a lot of empties and they didn't exist, now they do exist. So, you know, you're gonna have so much turnover that you have to deal with, depending on how big your district is, that you have to deal with. You know, and you're trying to build a budget, you have to decide who to bring in, who to keep out. Again, you know, did Erica replace somebody, or is she a brand new hire, a new position? You know, I don't know how you guys handle that, but at least ESP shows you when there are changes. But you have to understand what the columns are. And, you know, you might want to make sure you always have the actuals columns, because you might want to know where did Ellen Gordon go? You know, he was there or she was there on July 27th, but now she's not there. So was she replaced? You know, I don't know how you guys handle that stuff, but ESP does try to show you, you know, what was there when you reloaded, what's in the model, and then what's currently happening. I'll just do this real quick, when we'll do it as a practice later. If you think, okay, I do want Erica to be, you research it and you realize she should be in your model, you do want to budget for her next year, if you right click on her name, you have these copies here. And you can say copy from Infinite Visions, which means the current blue column only. And in this case, we wouldn't want to do that because that was empty anyway. But we do want to copy from the actuals, because now that she exists in the actuals, we want her to exist in the model. So this is just a quick way of bringing her values, her dollars, into the model. So right click on her, copy funding from 22-23 actuals. And it just says it cannot be reversed once you copy her. But you can inactivate her if you bring her in and you change your mind. I'll show you how to do that. But this is just letting you know I'm going to cancel that for right now. If I had value, because I can do that on somebody that's already exists. And if I were to copy from the actuals, it gives the same warning. It would overwrite any changes that I've made to her already. That's really all it's saying, is that you're going to overwrite your model. And are you sure you want to do it? So I'm going to right click, copy from actuals. And this is just a quick and easy way of bringing an employee. And I'll talk about what annualize is right after we copy her. So we have this thing that pops up whenever you're doing a save called the process log. And I recommend if you go to view, show process log, it will always pop up when it's doing something. I recommend having it pop up just so you know that ESP is, you can see it's got like a timer on it, because it's going to your database and it's copying her data from the actuals into the model. And you see there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So now watch her name. So now notice her name is, the line went away. She's now an active employee, and then her values showed up in the model. So she's now in the model. And if I were to go to the financials, her dollars, 81,370, there would be an $81,370 increase to 0111. Because her 81,370 is now part of the model, and that rolls over into the financials. So that's what we mean by everything you do on the employees is going to affect your financials. Any questions about that? Really important to understand. We'll go over in detail what each column is, but how to bring people, understanding the data sets, understanding new employees, bringing them in to the model. Now, there is no way, we do get asked a lot, there's no way to go and load just a single employee from your ERP. You have to load all the employees. So when you go to reload employees, and terminology is important too. When we say reload, we mean go to your Infinite Visions or go to your Business Plus and bring it into ESP. That's what reload means. My screen's black, just a second. Okay. Notice this little symbol right here. That means she was copied from either the blue or the purple. That's just to give you an indication of how she got into the model. Because when you first do it, all of these are obviously copied into the model, so we don't show that little symbol. But when you start copying just individual employees, it'll give you a little symbol. And you can clear that symbol later if you start to get a bunch of those. It's called the reconcile symbol, because we used to call it reconcile. We call it copy now, but we reconciled her from Infinite Visions into the model. So now she exists in the model. Just trying to find. Okay, so that was if a new employee shows up, but let's say an employee disappears and you want them out of the model. So let's look at Debbie Garrison here. So she does not exist anywhere else in the model. And the way you can know that is if you see this little red and blue icon, you'll notice that people who have the same person who has multiple fundings, they will have that symbol next to their name. Because right now they're next to each other. But if you start messing with your scope, right, because she has one in Fund 206 and in Fund 100. If I was looking only at Fund 100, this Fund 206 would not be there. So that little blue and red dot lets you know she has another funding somewhere else. But was it Ethel? A lot of scrolling going on left and right. Yeah, so but Ethel, she doesn't have a blue and red dot. So I know this is her only funding in ESP. And on July 27th, she was there, but she's no longer there or here, wherever here or there is. She's not here. So you research and you realize she was let go and there's no replacement for her. You can do the right click, infinite vision details, and maybe it'll tell you that her position was closed, or it might not. But you can see her main funding is gone from here. It's just all of these deductions that for some reason still live in infinite visions, but her main funding is gone. So more than likely, she's just completely gone from the district. And you want her out of the model. You can just simply right click and inactivate her. Now this takes us to the next thing we should talk about is, if you noticed when I did that, these two icons in the upper left corner went active. This is your save. Just like when you make changes to a spreadsheet, you can make multiple changes before you save. Let me reactivate her for a second. You can see if you have not made any changes that need to be saved in the grid, the save icon is not active. There's nothing to save yet. As soon as you make a change, right click, inactivate her. We don't want her in the model any longer. We want to take her dollars out. So I right click and activate her, and I could right click and do Kelly Golden too if I needed to. You can make quite a few changes. I wouldn't suggest making too many changes in case something goes wrong. You don't want to, just like under the spreadsheet, you don't want to make too many changes before you save. But notice you have a little pencil next to anything you change is going to have a little pencil next to it. So you can always see what you have changed. And then when you decide you're ready to save, you just click up here to save. Hang on, let me cancel that for a second. If you're not sure what you've changed, or if you want to see what you've changed and you don't see all the pencils, this other button that went active is called the pending changes. This tells you what you changed and then how you changed it. I know it's a little like programmy, but we changed her active from true to false, which basically means we inactivated her. But if you ever wonder what you changed, you can always click on that pending changes and it'll tell you what you've changed. If you ever make changes and you decide you don't want to keep the changes, you can click the refresh button. This is kind of like a close, don't save kind of a deal, but we're not closing. We're just saying don't save any changes. If you click refreshes, it says, hey, you made these changes. Are you sure you want to refresh? So just click refresh. It basically just refreshes the grid and wipes away any changes that you had made. So now I'm back to, notice that it went back gray because there's no changes anymore. Trying to remember who it was. Tim Gilbert. So we can right click. Actually, wait, Tim might be an interesting case to look at before we inactivate somebody. So here's a good example. Tim Gilbert. Notice he's got the red and blue twice. And he has model values in this line, but no model values in this line. I can almost tell without even scrolling that he probably moved positions. On July 27th, when this was loaded, he was at this account code, 100, blah, 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 blah. But then at some point, because look over here, in the actuals, he didn't exist then. But now he exists in a different account code. So that's probably a very good example of an employee that gets moved, because now he's in Fund 218. So this would probably be a good example where you would right-click and activate that funding. And let me go ahead and activate that other person I was going to inactivate, Gloria. Inactivate. So you would want to inactivate them. I think Gloria might be the same situation where she moved, but I want to inactivate those old positions. Now, when you inactivate or whenever you save anywhere in ESP, you have to create at least a 10-character note. And it's basically if you ever need to go back and try to figure out what you did or why you did it, that's the whole point. It's kind of an audit to help with the audit. And when I say audit, I mean, just trying to figure out why someone did something. And it would be just like inactivate old fundings. And notice the apply button did not go active until you hit that 10-character mark. If you're under 10 characters, you can't save yet. So you put in your note, this goes active, you click apply, your process log will show up. It shouldn't take but a few seconds. It depends on what you're doing, but it shouldn't take more than a couple of seconds. It goes away and the grid will refresh. And this might be a case where I would want to maybe put in Fund 100, just so I have less fundings. But remember, if you're only looking at Fund 100, I wouldn't see some of these other employees' fundings. So it's really important to understand what you're looking at versus what you hope to see in the grid. So now notice that Tim, this is the one that I inactivated. That line is now inactivated and the values are out of the model. And then I would go to this one because this one is his new position, right? Because this one existed and now it doesn't. This one didn't exist and now it does. So just simply do the right click, copy from Infinite Visions. You can also do, since we have two people, we need to do that too. You can hold the control key, select two people. They don't have to be next to each other. Anywhere in the grid, this is a new thing we've added with the control key. Then you can right click and I can do both employees at the same time. I can copy them both from the Infinite Visions actuals at the same time. So here comes the note again. We do have a shortcut. If you double click, a lot of times it will remember your last note.
I like that new addition that you can
the
pick
control key.
multiple people. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I've been asking Scott for it for a while. Okay, cool. So now I inactivated their old positions and activated their new positions. So now they're in ESP and they're correct positions. We haven't looked at their salary plan or benefit plans or anything yet, but at least we now have them in, their FTE is in ESP, in the model. And their old positions are not in the model. So when you create a New Year scenario, you're going to have to spend a lot of time hunting and searching for these type of discrepancies and then determining whether or not, how faithful do you need the model to match what's in actuals? Because obviously at some point you got to stop correcting and bringing in actuals and inactivating fundings because you have to lock down the numbers at some point. But so you need to when you're doing that, you need to make sure you show the actuals columns. By default, they're not there. Maybe they should be. We can talk about that, but and then just look for discrepancies. It might be where, okay, this data is old, July 27th. Well, let's just hide it. I don't even want it anymore. You could just hide it and then just show your model to the actuals. Maybe that is a little bit easier. Because more than likely, if they're in the model, they would be in your infinite visions anyway. Because as of July 27th, they were copied in. So you have to remember your model really is as of July 27th, and this is as of today. The purple is as of today. So you're trying to keep them in sync. One of the things that you'll come across, and I don't know why, could be because the data is old. A lot of times these work days, because this is the number of work days that they work. But a lot of times these people that were hired, let me see if I can find someone. Right, if they get hired mid-year, they've only worked half the year, so their work days are only going to be 93. Should be able to find somebody. So here's Melinda Starr. I'll have to find somebody with a lower. Oh, she'll work. No, she might not work. So another way, I'm doing this the long way. Another way of looking at data that you can do in the grids, because I'm trying to find somebody with a low work days. You can sort any column ascending or descending. Just click on the column, left click it to select it, and then you have this ascending, descending toolbar buttons. So now this is, and if you select a row, it will, even when the screen refreshes, it will remember what row you're on. So sometimes you have to do a bit of scrolling. It's a double-edged sword. Well, actually, I sorted the wrong way. So here's a good way to do it, because you can see all of these employees didn't have any actuals. So as of 6/27, all of these employees were there, but they don't exist in the actuals. Not till you get down to here, you start seeing where there's matches. But if I bring Melinda over, right click, copy from actuals, I want to bring her into the model, which is, we know what that does and how that works. You have an annualized employees. I'm not going to click it just yet, but I'm going to talk about what that is as soon as we copy her over. These employees, when they get hired mid-year like this, when they just show up in the actuals, their work days will not be a full year work days. Right, so right now she is only scheduled to work 777 days, and it should be 186. And the way ESP works, what we'll talk about tomorrow, is the way this annual rate, her annual rate is calculated. It's based on the number of her work days times how many hours she works times her hourly rate. So obviously, if her work days are lower, this annual rate will be low. So in ESP, we have this thing called annualize, and it will move their work days to match the position work days. It automatically goes through and looks all of the employees, looks at the start and end date of the position that they're assigned to. And for license, it's usually 186. And it will just automatically, not their position, the work calendar. It will automatically move their work days to match that. You can choose either to have it matched to the work calendar, the salary plan, or the position. And we'll show you how to do that on the when we get to the salary plan tab. So a way to kick that off is up here you have a recalculate button. recalculate employees toolbar button. You select that. One of the options here is annualize. I'm going to click annualize. And you don't need to do this often. You'll see this pop up a lot, a checkbox. But you only really have to worry about it when you've copied a lot of employees over into the model, a lot of mid-year hires. Because you want to make sure, yes, they only worked 93 days this year, but next year they're going to work 186 days. So we want to make sure that you're budgeting them at 186 days, not 93 days. We'll talk about all of these action items. At first, you're going to have a lot of people that I've told you that we do a lot of audits. You have a lot of people that will show up on that audit that are over 1.0 FTE, and that's because their positions don't get closed. So we should see some of these employees go to 186. And her annual rate went up. It was like 57 something, I believe, and now it's 62. So you can see it's really important to make sure we get the work days right, because that will affect their rates. So that's what annualize is. And an employee that has been annualized will have this little up and down green arrow, which means they were copied in from the daily, and then their days were moved to match either their position or their work calendar. It does not touch their hours. It has nothing to do with annualization. Any questions? So the annualization is a big part of copying the employees and making sure that they're being calculated correctly. Let's talk about FTE. We talked a little bit about it and how it is calculated. We have two different ways on the phone with us. In Oregon, it is based on the employee's work hours and 1 day of work hours. If they work 8 hours, just 1 day of the year, they are 1.0 FTE. In Washington, it's called work time, and it is the work hours times the work days as a ratio of, I'm going to go to the salary plans. I have a PowerPoint here that it should be in your PDF that explains how we calculate FTE. So you have three different methods. The work hours, which is what Oregon districts use. You tell it that you set it. Oh, sorry. Let me go back. Calc method and FTE calc source. All right, so it's programmed or set here on the salary plan tab because it can be different, because the administrators might have a different way from the licensed or the classified. But I think for most of the Oregon districts, it's set to work hours. It's a ratio of the number of hours they work in a day compared to the number of hours in a day of the position that they're assigned to. So for most of it, it's going to be the position, the source will be 8. So any employee that's 4 hours over 8 hours will be a 0.5 FTE. For Washington districts, they set theirs to work time. And then, Beth, do you guys use position or work calendar? Each district is different.
I thought it was work calendar, but I'm not sure.
I think it is work calendar. So then you have the, this is using work time, and this is the work time is the number of hours they work in a day or every day times the number of days that they work in a year. And then it's a ratio of that same work time of whatever work calendar the employee is assigned to. And that's how you get to, oh, here's a good example of, I made a change to the grid, and then I went to change my tabs. And it's asking me, do you want to save changes before you switch tabs? And I do not want to save the changes. I forgot what I was saying, but for the Oregon districts, if they're 8 hours, that's how you're going to get this salary FTE here. Here's an example: 4 hours means they're a 0.5 FTE. Notice that in the grid, talking about colors, you have a light green and a dark green. The dark green, these are values that are like derived values from either the assumptions tab or just like the FTE that we just talked about. These values come from a calculation done of the work hours. The work hours over the position work hours gets you this number. So notice that it's dark green with a red border, means it's not editable. The only way you could get that number to change is by to change this number. You have to save, and it would come back as 0.5. ESP would go in, recalculate this employee, and see, oh, 4 over 8 is 0.5, and that's how you would get 0.5. So anything dark green means it's not editable. It's derived from somewhere else, like the annual rate. This comes from the salary plans tab that we'll talk about tomorrow. And it's a combination of their work days times their work hours times their hourly rate. That's how this number is derived. So light green is editable. If I didn't want to do the annualized checkbox, which I did earlier because she was at 177, you could just go in and manually change people's hours if you need to, or change their work hours. That's really most of the changes you'll be making aside from their account code. And that's kind of a long, complicated process, but you can move people's account codes. We'll talk about that later in the week. Those are usually the only things you're going to be changing on the employees tab. All right, we got about 4 minutes left. Let's open it up to some questions. There's got to be some questions. Has to be. We've gone over a lot, and I hope I've done a good job of trying to just give a high-level overview of what ESP is, how it works, and it'll make a lot more sense as you start using it, and we do some actual work and do some test cases. It'll all make more sense. Feel free to go through the PowerPoint or the PDF. I talk a little bit more about how we calculate the FTE if you didn't quite understand that. For most of you guys, that's already set up, everything's set, you won't have to change it. You know, but we always do recommend, as you're using ESP, keep an eye on values and make sure that they're reflective of what you expect to see. If the FTE starts getting really weird, maybe somehow the value got changed, the setting got changed on the salary plans. But if you know somebody's 4 hours, they should be 0.5 FTE.
I got a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did anybody notice or get a prompt when they started the ESP that warned them that their scenario had not been recalculated in over 5 days?
Good question.
Maybe, maybe not. What we did, and we had to do this kind of as a level of protection, we had a few districts who went ahead with their adopted budgets, not realizing they hadn't been fully calculated, that they didn't have a green flag in the upper corner. You know, you always need to be aware, particularly if you're getting ready to do budget book or print reports or project or present any numbers, that flag needs to be green, which means that the scenario has been fully calculated. All the employee changes, all the assumptions, everything's been fully cooked into that scenario. And so in order to kind of protect that, we put a warning in that if a scenario is not a snapshot and it's not locked, that we'll actually give you a warning indicating that your scenario has not been recalculated for over 5 days. And I think it's 5 days, 5 or 7. And that's, you should never be afraid of recalculating your scenario. So it's something that we don't do it automatically for you for quite a few different reasons, but never be afraid to recalculate your scenario and always keep it refreshed. And if you're actively working in ESP with a scenario, you should be recalculating at least once a day. And let's see, Tim, go ahead and recalc this just to show you. Just do a full recalc. We're going to do it actually twice. And we'll be talking some more about this in January. But there's been some dramatic improvements in the performance of ESP. We learned an awful lot in the last year as we reached some limitations. But typically scenarios take about half the time they used to recalculate. Some are even faster. But in this case, you can see we're 24 seconds in, and we're doing the roll up. But roll up's good. Now we're actually calculating the scenario. And gosh, a full scenario recalc for this data set, it's going to be about a minute, under a minute. There, look at that, 52 seconds. And this used to take 4 and 5 minutes, 5-6 years ago. And we've made such an effort to prune down the time it takes to do anything. And I think we're being really successful. So what I'm trying to just encourage you is don't be afraid to recalc and keep that scenario recalced.
Now my flag is green.
Yeah.
And for the new people, we'll talk about what recalculation does tomorrow.
So anyway,
and another thing to be aware of, speaking of calculations, is don't forget about these action items when you do recalculate. They're usually something that you should at least initially, and there'll be a lot of these on when you create a New Year scenario. This goes through and looks at anything over 1.0. Like this is warning me that Christine Brown has a 2.0 FTE. And a lot of times this is that where they move and the old account does not get closed. Or somebody has a no benefit plan for some reason, but they have FTE or a salary with no FTE. So at first you're going to have a lot of these because things get miskeyed in your ERP, they come into ESP, we recalculate, and we find a lot of discrepancies that need to be cleaned up.
Yeah. And something that I'm actively working on is actually saving this action item message to the employee funding and actually setting a flag that there was an action item. So you'll actually be able be able to filter the employee grid and see the open action items, and that'll help you address them and fix them faster. So
And
you
here,
should
this
see,
is a, yeah.
you should see that by the time we lock down in January.
And here's a good example of where you might want to save this to a spreadsheet so that you have this available to fix. You can save that to a spreadsheet. Okay, if there's anybody that wants to reach out to me after this, just let me know if you need any help with anything. If not, we will talk tomorrow and maybe start doing some actual training activities in ESP. But hopefully today you guys got a good idea of what ESP is. And as we go through the week, it'll make a lot more sense. We don't want ESP to be scary because it's really not. It's just all math, really, behind the scenes, mostly. Any questions, anyone?
I want to talk to you, Tim.
All right. Okay, well, everybody else then, I will talk to you, all of you guys tomorrow. Take care, have a good evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye. Oh, by the way, everyone, these videos are being recorded. And sometime during the week or the end of the week, we'll get them up for, because if you have nothing to do over the weekend, you might want to watch them again.
And did we ever figure out who's on the dial-in 503?
Yeah, that was, who was that?
Darren?
Darren. Oh, Darren. Okay, yeah, right. Darren.
No, there's another dial-in. Darren's, I see him. 503-784-5259. Somebody still there?
Yes, that's me. That's Natalie from Lake Oswego School District.
Oh, okay. So your phone is still connected, or, I mean, we have you on audio too. So, okay, we're just curious.
Yeah, my audio wasn't working.
Oh, okay. All right.
Okay, thanks a lot, everyone. Bye.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, so what's going on, man?
No, so when do you want to get together to bring me up to speed? Do you want to do it tomorrow, during the day? Like, what is your...
Yeah, let's do it in the morning.
Okay.
Maybe about 9:30ish.
Sounds great.
Okay, what's your number? I'll give you a call.
My number is... Well, there's two things. Giving you my number isn't the hardest thing I've ever been asked. It has to do with Reynolds High School. My cell phone doesn't work here. So I can give you my number, but given what we're going to be talking about, not that it's PII, just that I work in a cubicle farm.
Right.
So my fellow colleagues get upset when I have conversations. So that is what was happening with me going to another room and using a work area that I'm not used to, and all the configurations, everything was crazy. And I would have gotten here earlier to set it up. In fact, I did, but they were using the office to onboard someone that needed to take a test.
Sure. Okay.
And so
Well,
that
I'll tell you
was the
what,
craziness.
I'll just shoot you an email in the morning and we'll just play it from there. Will you be able to check your email in the morning?
Yes, I'll be on Teams. So why don't you just team me?
Oh,
and
right,
just
right,
say,
right. Okay,
hey,
yeah,
I'm ready.
Yeah,
and then I'll grab my laptop and then come over to this office I'm using, plug in, then I'll call you, and then we can go from there.
Perfect. Perfect. All right, I'll ping you in the morning then.
But again, I apologize because that is not my practice to...
Oh, no, it's fine, man. It's fine. I'm just glad you came. Finally, you showed up. We'll get it figured out. No problem.
All right.
All right, bud. We'll talk to you tomorrow.